Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to Too Much Effing Perspective. I'm Alan Keller.
And I'm Alex Hoffman. Today's hit single is entitled Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, about the time Ken Stringfellow from the Posies went toe-to-toe with his band's drummer Mike Musburger. Did anything like that ever happen to you, Alan?
Kind of the opposite. My story is more about saving my drummer's ass than kicking it. You see, back in high school, I had a band called Bumstead, and our drummer was a year younger than us. He was a little guy named Scott, phenomenal musician, ends up being my lifelong music partner in the Falling Walendas. Anyway, Scott was getting picked on by this big, tall jock. Let's call him Paul, because that was his name. Anyway, so I knew about this, and I was concerned. So one day, I was having lunch in the cafeteria with a bunch of goofballs, and this Paul fella, he just took the chair out from under one of the guys at my table and then brought it to his own table. And because I knew he was getting on my bandmate's case, I decided I have to do something. I went over there and I said, "Give me back the chair."
Wow.
Just like that, with that kind of authority, that kind of straightforwardness. Now, this guy was on the basketball team. He was quite a bit larger than me. And he said something that you don't say to an Alan Keller. Make me.
Make me.
Then he followed it up with a big straight arm to my throat.
Wow.
And, I could have walked away.
You could have. Turned the other cheek, right? Is that what you did?
No, I only have one good side, so I'm always favoring that particular cheek. Now, fortunately, I didn't come unarmed. I had a paper plate with a fully frosted piece of carrot cake on it, which I proceeded to shove into Paul's face and then followed up with a quick right hook that, I don't know, hit an artery or something because he was gushing blood. And then I grabbed his head and put him in a headlock until the hall monitor stopped the whole thing.
You are like a love child between Clint Eastwood and Mike Tyson. That is really, really crazy.
And I think they were serving Tyson chicken for lunch.
What a weird coincidence. But anyway, it really sounds like you stepped up for your bandmate. That's pretty cool. I mean, Ken's story is a bit different. And for those listeners whose recall of 90s alternative band personnel has faded over the past 35 years, when Ken mentions Greg Dooley, he's referring to the singer of Afghan Wigs. Now, let's listen.
We've been on tour for like a year, Frosting on the Beater. Things are going well, but well is a relative term in music. We're playing festivals in Europe, playing on the main stages all over, sometimes close to headlining, blah, blah, blah. I mean, amazing, right? The physical reality was that we were there with four of us in the band. We had a crew of 3 people. And my wife at the time, Kim Warnick, was on tour with us in a splitter van with no windows and no AC, of course. It was 150 degrees in there if it was a degree. And we had stuff like, okay, we played the main stage of Roskilde Festival in Denmark, and then the next gig the next day is in France, 16-hour drive away. And it was just like that for a month and a half. So that's the context, that things were a little tense. And of course, we were all drinking those days. And, Mike, that time he was a very critical person. And we played a gig, and walking off stage, the gig was terrible, I think, on all of our parts. But he selected me and just got like 2 inches away from my face and started saying, "You did this and you did that, blah, 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 blah." And I just wasn't having it. And I decked him. I admit it. It was a terrible thing to do. Okay, well, that led to him leaving the band eventually. We couldn't work it out, which is, I think, also a tragedy. I think we could have, but we were all young and, there's pride and ego and all this kind of stuff. But I got back to Seattle, and I walk into a club to go to a show. And at that time, Greg Dooley was living in Seattle. And I opened the door, and this club had stairs, like you open the door and then there's stairs going up to where the rest of the club was. And at the top of the stairs, walking down like he's Ricardo Montalban on Fantasy Island or whatever, he's walking down, he sees me and he goes, "And in this corner, the killer, blah, 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 blah." He said, "You did what we were all thinking. Good job."
Thanks for joining us for this TMEP show hit single. And in this case, hit takes on a whole new meaning. If you enjoyed it, please follow, rate, and review our show wherever you listen to podcasts.
So tune in next time for more great Spinal Tap moments on
Too Much Effing Perspective. Too Much Effing Perspective is a Milwaukee Talkies original. Evergreen Podcast Network.